Now, my next guest is a remarkable lady from Norfolk. Her husband was the well-known and much-loved Reverend John Aves, and after he suddenly passed away while serving in the Holy Land and decided to take up her late husband's passion for the people of Israel. She set up the John Aves Educational Project, which seeks to empower disadvantaged young people to fulfil their potential through educational achievement. And Anne joins me in the studio now. Good morning to you, Anne.
Good morning.
So, how did the idea for this project come about?
Well, as you've just said, John went to the Holy Land in November 2003, and when he was there, he was living and working in a Palestinian refugee camp, Dheisheh camp, which is in Bethlehem. When he was there, he was working within the Dheisheh camp. There was a huge youth club in effect, and it was called IBDA. And IBDA in Arabic stands for, or means, to create something out of nothing. And that's where John was living and working. He was teaching young boys English, and he went with an idea of what that meant. They had different ideas. Their idea was to teach English through English football, which they knew inside out, and John knew very little, so had to phone home to his sons and check out how to teach English via football. And sadly, John, when he was there for 3 months, and just 2 weeks before he came back, he died very suddenly. And my sons and I, Ben and Edmund, it seemed that that's what we did. We would continue the work and the link that John had made.
Why do you feel it was important to continue John's passion?
Because we flew out there, we visited Dheisheh camp. We went out just a couple of days after John died, and we spent some time with the people in IBDA, and they just reached out to us and treated us with such love and compassion. And actually, as Bishop Graham said on, we have a website now, which I can give you details later, and he writes on that in an astonishing short period of time, John became their honoured guest and their confidant, and they called him Father John, which I think is truly extraordinary, as it was a Muslim camp, and they obviously loved him to bits. Bizarrely, when we were there, we did actually meet Yasser Arafat, and went to his compound in Ramallah and spent time in a private audience with Yasser Arafat, and he gave us a medal for John, a posthumous medal. And we had joined a banquet. Rowan Williams was there at the time and had cold fish and chips.
Oh, very tasty.
Yes.
So you set the project up.
Yes.
Who does it seek to help and how?
We went back a few times to Dheisheh camp, to IBDA, to talk about what we could do. And education, IBDA has been set up by two men who had actually been political activists in their youth, had spent time in prison for that, but decided that wasn't the way forward. The way forward was education, to give young people a sense of purpose, to rebuild their self-esteem, and education. And I've worked at City College for many, many years, 26 years this September, and John and I have been involved in working with young people, whether it's church youth clubs, whether it's my job at City College. So education seemed to be the natural choice. We knew it had to be, anything in memory of John had to be alive, had to be dynamic. It couldn't be something static, because he was such an alive person. An Attleborough church warden described him as a firework, a mixture of banger, rocket and sparkler, and I think anybody who knew John would say that he'd actually got it just right. So that's where we started. We talked about education, and we began by bringing a young man, Baha Milhelm, here to study at City College, and indeed the last time I was here, Baha was with me.
So does it involve, when you're talking about education, bringing people over to this country, or also educating them in their homeland as well?
Well, we've had, as always, when you embark on something, it's usually we didn't really know where we would go. It was a leap of faith. We trusted that actually this was the right thing to do. And initially we did fundraise and bring a student over to college, and college were very generous, and Baha studied his fees were paid by the college, and he did an access to higher education course and did really well. The tutors were massively supportive to him, and he ended up getting a full scholarship to City University in London. But we knew that was very, very expensive, a huge pressure on one young person. How do you choose one young person from 1,000 to come to this country? So we began to think again, expand what we did, and decided that actually we could fund more people if we funded them to attend universities locally. So the project now funds young people from IBDA, who work in IBDA, who live in Dahisha camp and attend Bethlehem or Al-Quds University, which is a Arabic name for Jerusalem.
Okay. Now, if all of this requires a lot of fundraising, I'm guessing, how do you do that fundraising?
I formed a committee, so it's no longer just myself and my two sons, Ben and Edmund. I should also actually say my son Ben would want me to say that he did his very best to change Baha from an Arsenal supporter to a Norwich City supporter. Took him 2 matches, but I'm not sure if he succeeded, but Ben remains loyal to Norwich City. He'd want me to say that. So we have a committee and we do the usual fundraising. I've done a number of talks. The Bishop Graham agreed to be our patron, which was a massive thrill for us. We've held some fundraising events. At one of them, Derek and Bridget James joined us when Derek was the sheriff, and Bridget actually is one of John's cousins. So I've talked at various churches, and so far we've raised over £35,000, which is, I think, quite a tremendous fund from a very small organisation. So I'm always available to do talks. My last visit was, I get withdrawal symptoms if I'm away for too long, and I returned in November 2001 and went to meet the students that we're currently sponsoring, and also to talk to the tutors. And when I was talking to the tutors, we talked about education and the difference in teaching and learning in the two countries. We have a much more student-centred way of teaching and learning. Theirs is still very traditional. And out of conversation, we talked about the need to retrain teachers. And one of the universities, particularly Al-Quds, I just loved being there. It reminded me of City College, a real community university. And out of conversation, a casual remark has got me working and thinking. And the casual remark was, why don't you come back here and teach?
Ooh.
And that's what I'm working on now. And to work on a partnership so that I go there and some of the tutors come back here to Norwich and to work at City College for a bit.
Sounds fantastic. Now, if people wanted to find out more about how they could support you, how can they do that?
They can go and look at our newly launched website, which has been created by a friend of my other son, Ed, and it is www.jaep.org.uk.
Lovely. All the details are on there. And thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning. Much appreciated.